Hi everybody. I'm here today in Sedona, Arizona. I thought I would finally give you some really nice view to check out. So here we are today at a really sweet spot. Hope nobody else comes up here. So if you ever wonder why people come to Sedona, this is why. It's just really gorgeous. And this is also a really powerful and spiritual spot. There's crystal shops everywhere, and a lot of New Age people come here. But there's also something really deep in the land. Ancestrally, this is where a lot of tribes would come to do ceremony. This is just a very powerful spot in general. And a lot of people come here, although it's a place that you go to like you would go anywhere else. A lot of people actually come to Sedona to come back to themselves. It actually reminds me of India a little bit. It's the same kind of thing. People often say, I'm going to India to find myself. That sometimes we need to leave to come back in. And Sedona is one of these places that for whatever reason it seems that a lot of people they go to find themselves again. So I'm actually here for a month, and during my time here I've done a lot of thinking, a lot of feeling, a lot of kind of soul searching. And I also realized that a lot of my teachings that I've been giving, they're things that I've learned in the monastery, things that I've been bringing with me for these last 10 years. But I'm also really interested to start creating some fresh realizations, some fresh teachings. And I have some here that I've created on this trip that I want to start sharing with you. I found for myself a really perfect balance of life is when I'm learning and I'm receiving as much as I'm giving. This creates a feeling that I'm also moving forward as a practitioner, as a person, and then also I can share that and help other people move forward. So like I mentioned at the last talk last week about some people, if you feel connected, it helps people drop in a deeper way. I really started thinking about the underlying tendencies of the mind. I started thinking that there's ways that if we can kind of break the framework of the mind, it allows the mind to drop to a really deep level. And often in these talks, we talk about more of the surface level of the mind, I would say. We talk about, thoughts. We talk about these feelings of feeling good. We talk about that spaciousness. We talk about a lot of things that if we were talking about the ocean, we'd almost be talking about the waves. This is really important because the waves are what we see all day long. They're what are right in our face. There's something else, though, that we could talk about, which is the currents. So if you drop down beneath the waves, what are the deeper movements of the ocean? And maybe if you could deal with the deeper movements, then the upper movements, they kind of just fade away by themselves. So something that I've been realizing since I've been here is that I misperceive reality on a really deep level. And I'm going to explain to you how. So if you have a feeling, an emotion about something, let's say you don't have a lot of money. So you feel, I don't have a lot of money, I must be doing something wrong. I'm doing something wrong, right? And the question on top of that would be, well, why? So why do you feel like because you don't have a lot of money, you're doing something wrong? Yeah, if you're in a relationship and you're fighting, this is probably not a good relationship. Why? Right? You see the government, right? There's like a lot of fighting. Oh, this is bad. Why? That we often take our emotions as a truth, that we feel something is a certain way, and then we say, oh, that's the reality of the situation, and then we react to it. So for instance, let's say that an entrepreneur, they go out and they're working on these new projects, and I'm sure even if you take like Steve Jobs or somebody, very poor for a long time doing all these different things, but he wouldn't just look at his bank account and say, oh, my bank account's at like negative $1,000, I must be going on the wrong path. He doesn't take his bank account to be a representation of how he's doing. He takes his work to be a representation of how he's doing. So depending on what you're perceiving and what you're taking as a representation, then you start to see what you're defining yourself as. And I'll try to say this again and again in different ways, make it a little bit clearer. So what happens is that we have our perceptions. Our perceptions come through our senses. So at any given moment, there's an infinite amount of things to perceive. I can perceive all of these different sounds. I can perceive many different visuals. I can perceive many different feelings in my body. I can perceive different smells. I can perceive different tastes. And I can perceive different mind objects. Same thing like you. You have all of these perceptions available to you. But even if you notice right now as you're listening to me, maybe you're not noticing the background noises around you. Maybe you're not noticing the feeling of the clothing on your body. that we have all of these perceptions available to us, but if you tried to perceive them all, you would overload. You can't. So we have to focus on the perceptions that are the most relevant to us. So even on a very basic level, what we perceive in our daily lives, it's actually a culled version of all of our possible perceptions. That we could perceive all of this, but we're actually only perceiving this. Why do we choose these things to perceive? Because we feel that these things are important, these things are relevant, these things play with our story, these things define us, who we are, what we know, our comfort. So our perceptions are actually habitual. What do we habitually perceive? So maybe we're always perceiving the wrong thing. I'm sure you know people in your lives that are kind of very negative, or maybe people that are very positive. They're living in the same world. Yeah, I go to India and I meet a lot of people. They have no money, they're very poor, but they're happy because they're not fixating on what they don't have, they're fixating on what they have. Yeah, and then I know a lot of people that have a lot of money and they're miserable because they're focusing on all the things they can't get, all the things that they don't have, that they want. So whatever we decide to perceive on, our selected perception, our selective perception, we create a reality, we create a story. We see this small amount of things and we say, oh, that's the reality. And we have emotions associated to those, right? So again, if you take somebody who doesn't have any money, they'd feel I don't have a lot of money, and they'd say, oh, I must be going on the wrong path because I'm broke. So they create a representation of the situation as they think it is, and they assign an emotion to it. That's a feeling, and that's like a placeholder. So if you've noticed, like, everything is changing around us, everything is changing within us. But when you feel an emotion towards a situation, it often stays. If you're in a fight with somebody, I even noticed that, maybe a bully punched me in the stomach in the first grade, and I was on retreat, and I was, 35, so I was like, 30 years later, and I was still angry at that bully, and it was the same angry that I felt in the first grade. Yeah, so that feeling remained the same, which means that the story that I was assigning to it was the same. My perception, I locked it in place, that it was this one way. So the emotion stayed consistent because that emotion is representing to me the reality. And then I react to that emotion. So I feel the anger towards that bully, and then I react to it. I say, yeah, he was a jerk. He shouldn't have done that. This is, by the way, like a 5-year-old. And I'm going through all of these things about how bad this person was because I'm believing my representation of the reality. Okay? So if I could, first of all, calm down, and then I see, okay, I feel angry. Why do I feel angry? Because I felt hurt. Oh, because I wanted love and I got something else. And what actually was the situation? That bully, that little kid, he was 5 years old, he didn't know what he was doing, right? Or he wanted love, or he wanted to feel like funny or something. And it's a completely different situation, and it was just a moment that I saved emotionally in time, and I kept perceiving it and reacting to it. And this is what trauma is. This is the definition of trauma, is that we freeze a situation and we keep reacting to it. And a lot of us do that, and a lot of us carry situations with us throughout our lives. It's like we have like a basket in our heart that we keep filling up with these rocks, that things we haven't processed, things we haven't dealt with. And even in our life right now, we're still adding to it, things that we're not dealing with. We keep adding and building and building. So what's really important is to start looking at the perceptions that you're holding and trying to really see, is that the full story? Is that it? And is my emotion, is my perception of the reality the actual reality? Is it the full reality, or is it my picture of it? And so for instance, let's say again, so if somebody doesn't have a lot of money and they feel like, oh, I'm doing the wrong thing because I'm trying and it's not working, maybe they have to step back and say, you know what, actually, I don't know. Maybe I am on the right path. Yeah, maybe it's just around the next corner. Birth is painful, right? If you look at what's going on in the government, there's all of this stuff happening, all of this shadow and darkness and hate and misunderstanding coming out. And through that, it seems like a lot of people are starting to wake up. They're starting to sharpen their perceptions. They're starting to understand and come together more. So even if you see something happening that you want to call bad, maybe it's actually the thing that's needed to get to the best place, to the highest place. Even things that are difficult, even things that are painful, maybe they are actually exactly what's needed. Maybe they're that painful birthing process to bring things in the right path. And we don't know. Yeah, we have our ideas, we have our perceptions, we have our thoughts, we have the stories that we assign to things. But if we can start to drop those stories, we'll see that, okay, I have an emotional response to what's going on, but that's not the truth. And we try to take our emotions as the truth. Yeah, and it's really important to see this, because especially when you're sitting in meditation, you're watching your mind, you'll see your mind going to all these places. And every place it's going, it's because it's just believing itself. It's believing the stories that it's told itself. It's believing its value systems. It's believing what is good for it and what is not good for it, and what it wants and what it doesn't want. One of the things that brings the most happiness is actually contentment. It's actually when you want nothing. When you're totally content, that's when you feel happy, right? But our minds don't know that. Our minds always want something else. And a lot of us, we assign success to how much of that stuff we can get. We don't assign success to how happy we feel. We believe the emotions, we believe our perceptions, and we think the more stuff, the more money, the more possessions, relationships, status, power, functions, worth. We try to grab all of these things thinking that that's a definition of how successful I am, right? So if somebody's trying and they're not getting the job, they're trying, they're not getting money, they're trying, the relationship's not working, whatever kind of little part of your life that you're working on, and you're not getting the result you want, you might define yourself as a failure because this thing is not working the way that you want it to. But that's just a story that you're putting on top of it. That actually maybe that stuff isn't working because it's not supposed to work. Or maybe that stuff's not working because it's not the path that you're supposed to be following. Or it's not what's really going to make you happy. Or maybe it's not working because it's a challenge, because you have to keep stumbling and falling and falling. Because success is standing up one more time than you've fallen. Yeah, that's the only definition of success. It's actually that you've just stood up again. That if you end on a fall, then you're a failure. If you stand up, then you're succeeding. Right? That's all there is to it. But we keep assigning our stories and our emotions and believing them and reacting to it. And then that's the mind that we carry around all day long. And a lot of us are suffering greatly because we believe the stories. Because we're taking our limited perceptions as a whole reality, creating a story on that limited perception, having this like as an emotion which stores that emotional state in us. And then we're constantly reacting to that emotion, thinking that things are a certain way. Yeah, this might be a little complex, so maybe you have to like watch this one a couple times, I don't know. But we create our realities by what we decide to focus on. We create our realities by our limited perceptions and our reactions to things. And you can step out at any point. You can stop reacting to those things. You can look at the emotion and start to break it apart and see the full situation. You can start to go in and open up the perception that there's a lot of ways out of it. Right? But it's really important that we stop assigning our stories and our meanings to things that we're perceiving, because we're not right. We'll never know. And it's normal. You're going to be a human. You know, if a giant wolf jumps up on this rock and starts growling at me, I'm going to feel afraid. I'm going to say danger. And I'm going to say, okay, how do I get out of that situation? That's realistic. That's okay, right? Our perceptions are okay. Our reactions are okay. They are mixed with reality, but they're not the reality, because I don't actually know what's going on. I'm not 100% certain. So we do our best, but we also have to stay open to the fact that we're not really sure what's going on in each moment. Yeah, we have to keep that openness, and it creates like a space. And that space is able then to reside parallel to our human experience, right? So if you feel like I'm a failure, you could say, okay, that's my story. I'm a failure because things aren't working. But then also you could say, and I don't actually know. Maybe I'm not. Maybe everything's happening the way it's supposed to for me to become world famous, right? And you hold that space open. And sometimes if we believe our stories too much, we create them. If you know people that have abandonment fear, right? I know like when you were back in high school, and and I had a girlfriend, and she was really afraid of losing me. She would call me and call me and call me and bug me and be like, where are you? Why haven't you called me? What's going on? And by grabbing onto me so much, she would push me away, that then I would break up with her. And she's like, see, I knew it. You know, she, out of her own fear, she created the situation that she was afraid of from the beginning. I had this one time when I was in the monastery that I went on a hike through the forest, and I slept alone in the forest. And I was kind of in the forest outside of Heidelberg, so completely alone, nobody around, nobody knew where I was. And I woke up in the middle of the night in my sleeping bag just on the forest floor, and I heard something walking around near me. And I heard it kind of like sniffing and walking, and it didn't know how big it was. It sounded like it was maybe that big. I had no idea what was in the forest there. I didn't know what was going on. And I was laying there, and I was terrified, and I had a flashlight. So I was in my sleeping bag, and I picked up the flashlight, and this thing was walking around sniffing, and I was about to turn it on to see what this animal was. And suddenly I had a thought. And I said, if I turn on this flashlight, I'm making myself visible. If I turn on this flashlight, I'm making this situation about me. And if this is some kind of thing, it is going to come at me because I'm saying like, oh, I'm right here. That out of my fear, I'm actually making myself a target. Whereas if I just lay there and didn't do anything, although I was afraid, that animal wasn't there for me. It was sniffing around something else. That through my fear of everything kind of attacking me in the forest at night, I was about to kind of shine a light in the darkness and show myself and be like, oh, I'm here. That I was about to create the very thing that I was afraid of happening through the fear, through following through with the fear. And this is really interesting. If you look closely, you see oftentimes our fears, if we act out of them, they create the thing that we're afraid of. And I don't understand why this happens. It's crazy, but it happens. We create the things we're afraid of when we act out of that fear. So it's really important to look at those stories, look at those perceptions, and also allow ourselves to not know. Also open up this space to say, maybe we're not sure what's going on. Yeah, maybe it's going to happen another way. Sure, I'm a human. I'm still living in this 3D world with my thoughts, my feelings, my psyche, my perceptions, all of this. And I still need to behave accordingly, right? So it's like we're not going to be able to drop all that stuff. Right? If something happens and you still feel like a failure, like that's an old system, like it's not going to be that easy to get rid of it. But you could feel that feeling of being a failure and say, but maybe not. Maybe I'm assigning meaning to the wrong things. Maybe I feel like I'm a failure because the money or the relationship or the job or the position or, maybe you're assigning your worth to something, but that thing is not actually a representation of your worth. Your worth comes from something completely different within yourself. Yes, we have to allow yourself to feel whatever you feel, but don't take that as the truth. Understand that all of your feelings, your stories, they're a representation of the truth that you yourself are creating to try to relate to things, to know how you're supposed to react and respond and behave. And I think that's normal. That's how you live in life. You have to conceptualize things. You have to know, what can I eat? What can I eat? What's going to kill me? What can I kill? Where's warmth? Where's coolness? Where am I going to get my needs fulfilled? That we have to assign meanings to things, but we also have to realize that sometimes our meanings are wrong. And the definition of closed-minded is when we can't let go of that, when we're so sure that we're right. And actually, all of us are closed-minded about some things. Yeah, we often say those people are closed-minded, but I'm open-minded. And the truth is we are all closed-minded about certain things because we all on some level believe our stories. On some level, we all believe the meanings that we're assigning to some things. Yeah, so we really have to start letting things go, allowing space for things to be different than we think they are, for something to mean something else than we think it does. To maybe, we're right around the corner from the thing that we've always wanted, but we're about to give up because we haven't had it yet. Yeah, we don't know. So you have to allow that space to be open in your life. And also when you're sitting in your meditation, then you're not obsessing about things. Because oftentimes in meditation, there's also people, they're sitting to meditate and they think they're failures at meditation, they can't do it, they're frustrated, or they're thinking about their lives and they think that their lives are a mess and everything's wrong. And, we get into a big pity party in ourselves and we think how bad we are and how this doesn't work and this isn't for me and I should give up and all this. We assign all of these stories and negative meanings to everything. And then we just think like, we're not good enough, this doesn't work, I don't work. And if in your meditation, whatever comes up, whatever thoughts, whatever judgments, I guess especially, come up, if you're really allowed to say, I actually don't know if that's true. Yeah, I don't know if that judgment's correct. I don't know if my story about that is correct. I don't know if those perceptions are correct. I'm not sure. And when you take that mind of being not sure, you can actually drop into more of a surrender, more of a trust, more of spaciousness. And actually, when you start to allow space, that space creates a feeling of relaxation and peace, but also that's the space of possibilities. That when you are able to start letting go of your story, start letting go of your perceptions, your emotional reaction, your belief in everything just the way that you think it is and you're experiencing it, you're opening up the space for new possibilities to come in. Yeah, when I was lying there with the flashlight, if I had shined it on that thing, then it would see me and then it would come at me. But because I left it off, I was opening up the space for something else to happen, like for that thing just to walk away. Yeah, that when we just allow things to be, when we take ourselves out of it, when we see things a little more objectively, with a little more patience, a little more understanding of the greater web and not seeing ourselves in the middle like, I have to do something. Patience is a virtue for a reason. Because sometimes if like there's this huge kind of chaos around us, of course we're tempted to jump in and try to do something and fix things. But maybe we're actually supposed to just sit there and hold space and wait for everything to calm down. Maybe we're supposed to wait for a moment. Sometimes fights and conflicts need to happen to create clarity, right? Sometimes people have to go in the wrong direction to then realize and go in the right one. You know, sometimes an alcoholic has to get so drunk and miserable that they clean their life up. Yeah, it's never really so certain about which way is going to eventually lead you to the right place, or also kind of what's happening around us and why. So it's really important to create this space, this trust, this openness, to allow different ways of looking at things to happen, to allow a greater reality, more possibilities in, to allow things not to be the way that we think they are, but to really just open up. And also then there's something like trust and something like surrender and something like presence that comes in it. Because suddenly when you've let go of your story, you're present. You're present with the actual situation that's happening. And then you're able to really respond, right? You're able to respond in the moment because you're not carrying a prepackaged conception story of what's going on. You're able to fully be present and fully respond to things as they need to in the moment. And that's actually when you perform at your best, when you're able to flow in the moment, like in Taoism, like when you're one with the Tao, or in martial arts. Like you have to be super present to do whatever it takes, whatever's going on in the moment. Right? So actually the more that we can let go, and it's good to have again your humanness and your general ideas and perceptions, but then you have to really let go, allow things to be different than you think, and allow yourself that space for new possibilities to come in, and for yourself to react and to respond any way that you need to in the moment. So again, when we meditate, and we'll be doing meditation soon, for the meditation, really just start opening up and letting go, and understanding that you don't actually know. And if you're sitting to meditate and your mind is racing, just let it go. It doesn't mean that you're a bad meditator. It doesn't mean you didn't get it today. Maybe it just means that you need to relax. Maybe the more that you're trying to get it to work because your story is, oh, I need to try harder, I need to push more. Maybe your story is that I'm a failure, so you feel bad about yourself, and because you have this like negative state, your mind is racing because it's trying to get away from that negativity. You're trying to push yourself away almost, right? So sometimes in the meditation itself, you actually just have to let go and say, I'm not sure, I don't know if this is working or not working, right? This is like the definition of acceptance. You just accept things as they are, taking away your preference, your perceptions, your stories, just accepting things, being with them, allowing things to be like they are. And this will also naturally bring the mind to a place of stillness and peace and rest and contentment, because you realize I don't actually have all the answers. I'm just kind of a witness to all of this stuff. And that'll really get you also into the zone of meditation. And this will also help you in your daily life. So that was a lot, but that's what this week of Sedona has been about for me, all of these kinds of reflections. So I hope that this has really been something that you'll be able to work with, that's helpful for you, that you'll be able to look at your own life and see what are the meanings and stories that I'm assigning to events, and how am I reacting to those, and slowly pulling first apart your reactions to what's going on, and then actually looking at the stories and slowly starting to pull back the stories. And then you can even look at your perception and say, why am I even just perceiving this one limited thing? Try being thankful, right? Try sitting here and just thinking, what are a couple things that I'm thankful for, right? Take control of your perception. Shine the light of awareness in a positive direction for yourself, right? That's empowerment. We are reclaiming control of our mind. Otherwise, the horses are dragging us through the dirt, right? We need to be in control. We need to say, no, this is where you're supposed to go. We're supposed to be taming ourselves, right? So allowing the mind to go into positive places as well. It's a huge part of this, because we realize, oh, the world is not like I thought it was. The world is what I perceive it to be. The world is the pieces that I'm taking. And the more that we get that, the more we get a bigger picture, and the more we learn how to respond in a healthy and actually helpful way. So thank you again for listening, and stay tuned for the meditation.